Hey there, friend.
Hello. So Mumi's still as cute as you remember?
Yeah, fluffy.
He's so fluffy.
He's sitting on a pillow for now, being very good.
Wow.
Amazing.
How long is that gonna last?
Nastia trained him. I don't know.
This shit feel like I won't ever make it home. Traffic's backed up, I got to get off of this road. Foot on the gas.
Yeah, as far as I know, he's known for his documentaries.
Oh, who the hell are you talking about, Lily?
Well, my friend Mumi.
Hey, what show is this?
Oh, yeah, okay. From St. Petersburg.
And Brookline.
This is She's in Russia. I'm Lily.
And I'm Smith.
From snowy St. Petersburg, I should say. It's snowing.
Oh, nice. So today we're talking about the finest film of the 21st century. Really, cinematic and
Masterpiece.
masterpiece, some might say. Yeah, it really walks that nice line between reality and fiction. It's almost better as a documentary than as fiction.
It's actually a piece that contains the best final shot in contemporary cinema, according to certain critics. So,
oh, also it's pronounced what? How did the guy pronounce it? Donbass.
Who?
I don't know. One of the fuckers who had to get up before and like masturbate all over the stage for 30
Donbass
minutes.
is like how you say it in Russian, but he was probably like just being annoying.
Donbass.
I mean, other than like Donbass or something. Donbasson.
Yeah, okay. So on Friday evening, we went to see this film called Donbass. It's a fiction film. Excuse me. Made by Sergei Loznitsa, who is a Russian-Ukrainian filmmaker who has lived in like somewhere in Germany, probably.
He's
Berlin,
Russian?
for like the past 20 years. Yeah, I think that's how they introduced him. Let me see what his Wikipedia page says.
Like he was born maybe in Russia, but then I think he was born in Ukraine.
He was born in the Brest Voblast in the Belarusian SSR.
Oh, Belarusian. He's Belarusian. Yes, that's right.
But his Wikipedia IDs him as a Ukrainian director. So
he is, because I think he was born in Belarus, but then like grew up or something in Ukraine, and then has lived for the past 20 years. People, 20 years, very out of touch with Ukrainian.
Okay, wait, no. He
20 years in Berlin.
Since 2000, he has worked as a documentary film director in St. Petersburg. Okay, that's a weird sentence. And then the next sentence is, in 2001, he and his family moved to Germany. So he's been there 18 years.
Oh, I'm sorry, 18, not 20.
Yeah.
This is the same thing.
His kids are still in high school.
I'm just saying he's been in Germany for quite some time, so that just keep that in mind. But Loznitsa.
Okay, to be fair, like people who are in other countries could do something, Like,
I agree that they can. But that definitely makes it more difficult. That's why it's just like difficult to have like your on the ground kind of. It's difficult to be present for. I don't know, not like Lily, particular events,
Lily,
but like
pose
feelings.
This question for you: what if you watch some YouTube videos?
Oh well, then you know everything.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. What are you even talking about?
That you're
the internet opens up the world. What? You're right. What did I even say?
All right, wait.
Hear some things. That's what I like. So, okay. So sorry. What do you want to do?
We should do like a proper way of introducing the film.
Okay.
Like, what is it?
Okay. So, Loznitsa, if that's how you pronounce his name, I don't know. Loznitsa? No, it's spelled with a Z. He's known for making documentaries. No, for example. Oh, sorry. I have to close Telegram. I mean, you have his Wikipedia open, but he made. I know he made Maidan, which I don't know. It's supposed to be a documentary.
But who knows now?
Okay, and then like another one he's famous for is called, I think, My Joy, and something else.
Yeah, he's really quite accomplished.
He's very prolific. I think he's put out like something like 14 films or like of different lengths in 10 years or something like that. Is that right?
I don't know.
some combination of those, like 10 things, 14 years of 40 things. He makes a lot of movies. Prolific. But yeah, he's known as like a documentarist or whatever, which makes the fact that this film is not a documentary important because
and confusing for the public.
Confusing because the movie is shot completely with actors, but it is, according to the makers, it is based on real events that, and this is what I read from the description, that were, I think I read this in the description on the website for the Museum of the Moving Image, or is where we saw it. It was based on real events that Loznitsa either heard about people, or saw on YouTube.
Correct. And not just there, he said some of the YouTube videos he recreated scene for scene.
Yeah. Or like some of the things, like the situation with the journalist, like he met that guy and then recreated from his memory. Right. So there's the based on real events factor is definitely, whatever, that's like part of the way the film's presenting itself. So that's how, I don't know what you call those, like pseudo documentaries work, but yeah, it's not like actually a documentary by any means, but it definitely like plays with the genre a lot because there's no main character. It's a series of vignettes, so it cuts from different scenes and just what he would say is like recreates different scenes that all take place in Eastern Ukraine. What I imagine is 2014, 2015, but it's not specified, but it like appears to be like in the heat of the conflict kind of thing.
Yeah, that's actually another interesting thing. The fact so the way the vignettes work is like a vignette will play for maybe anywhere between like 5 and 15 minutes, and it will say the location, but it doesn't say the year, which is actually
it doesn't even say the location. It will say like a small town. Okay, do you want to talk about that?
First I just want to say, yeah, so we went to see this movie at the museum, as Lily said, the Museum of the Moving Image in Queens, before Lily went back to St. Petersburg. And it was the first movie in this like opening series. And so like everybody and their mother had to get up on stage and talk. And it's like, those guys with chin length hair who have to like pontificate about nothing for like 15 minutes when we
because
just
it's
wanted
like
to
in a series
watch the movie.
What's the series about?
I don't remember. But there's like the next day there was one about Putin and stuff, so I don't know exactly what the topic was.
I think another of he has a film called Victory Day, also a movie called Victory Day, which I think might be a documentary.
We had reservations for this really good Greek restaurant in Astoria, and we missed them because everybody had to,
because the movie is 2 hours long plus all the like Columbia and museum people talking.
Yeah,
made it like 4 hours.
It's like shut the fuck up.
It was messed up.
It was messed up. So at any rate, the thing we're trying to get across is like, yeah, this film definitely like plays with that. Wait, is this a documentary? Is this fiction? And the camera work, especially like at times, it's really shaky, as if like some random person could be holding the camera, and like a central thread throughout it is that there's these group of people that are playing actors in the film itself, and so it's doing that whole like
I wouldn't say that's essential.
Thing.
That's just the opening and closing scene.
Opening and closing, okay.
Both scenes,
and it does that thing where like you're supposed to question what reality is because this is not only a hot war but also like an information war.
Well, so here's the thing. It's like so there are a few ways in which this movie, I think, is a problem. This is a pest on the world. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so you presented all of what you just said, but it's like, on the one hand, we can just be like, okay, this movie like plays with truth and fiction and stuff, and like call it a day. Yeah. But why I like, so I take issue with it. I don't know. You can say your own opinion, but I actually didn't enjoy it. So it's hard for me to separate if I didn't enjoy the movie only because of its like very biased content, or if I didn't enjoy it also because of its like qualities as a film. I think both.
I don't know if you're able to separate that.
Well, maybe you're not able to separate
it, stirred up.
But I can say for sure, like I'm not into the tactics that were used, like the filmmaking tactics of really long, like like really long shots or like holding on to a scene for too long where you're just like in the scene and in the scene and in the scene and in the scene until you're sort of like beat to death. I like don't particularly like that aesthetic usually, so that doesn't surprise me that I wouldn't like it in this case also. But then the other problem is I read things of people describing the film as like really uncomfortable. It's definitely uncomfortable because it's just like,
well, you're being beaten over the head with like what's the word for that? It's not like gruesome images, because there is definitely violence, but like
grotesque.
Yeah, maybe grotesque, or like, I'm trying to think of one, like, what about the example where there's a bus of people, just like regular people, and they get stopped by what do you want to call them? The Eastern Ukrainian troops?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, for people that hear these like languages a lot, like Western media refers to them as separatists.
Yeah, Western media refers to them as separatists. They refer to themselves as Apolchensi, which is like militia.
Okay, so
people.
the Eastern Ukrainian militia.
But well,
and to align in people's brain, Eastern Ukrainian militia has an alignment with Russia. Just simply put that against Western Ukraine.
Eastern Ukraine is okay. If anyone knows anything about the war in Ukraine, you know that there's like an East and West. Western Ukraine is what people refer to just as Ukraine, with like Kiev and the government that's recognized by the rest of the world.
The U.S. gives weapons.
Yeah, where the U.S. is supportive both financially and ideologically, and militarily. So that's Western Ukraine. That's what when someone says Ukraine nowadays, that's what they're talking about, Western Ukraine. Eastern Ukraine is the part of Ukraine that touches borders with Russia, where there is a higher population of like only like Russian speakers. I guess that is important now. Where there are now currently exist two self-proclaimed republics, the Donetsk and Lugansk republics, and those republics are not recognized by the international community as countries. They are referred to in media as that territory is referred to as occupied Ukraine,
occupied by Russia,
implying occupied by Russia, and those people are referred to as separatists. Though before 2014, all of this was calmly referred to as Ukraine without any like issues. They were all Ukraine, and so the now like huge divide in the country. It's confusing because linguistically, like, the words are very loaded. Whatever word you use is like from one or the other side.
Right.
So it's never going to be an
really
objective
annoying.
word. But yeah, the people...
And apparently we're Eastern Ukrainian sympathizers.
Well, yeah, because like there's also... we're in... Russia, I don't think, has yet to admit its like military presence in Eastern Ukraine, but like I think that has been established, right?
Yes.
So you have like the paramilitary. There was
a lot of years. I think that they have admitted.
Okay, well then you can even say, the thing is, you can say, some people refer to them as pro-Russian or whatever, but it's a really complicated subject, so it's hard to like sum up the sentiments of all of Eastern Ukraine with like one phrase. But they are people who are like the republics, I think, formed from being anti the government that was put in or that arrived after Maidan. Okay. Get it?
Fair enough. All right. I think that's enough information.
Okay. Enough for you.
But basically, I was just going to say, like, what is the word for describing a scene, like, when I'm just going to refer them to as the militia, because I don't want to say Eastern Ukrainian militia all the time. So what is the word for, like, that aesthetic feeling, if that's a phrase, of when the militia forces all the men to get off the bus and strip down? Like,
that one commander lady.
Right. Like, would you call that grotesque? I feel like there's another word for it, because it's not visually...
Cringy. I don't know.
Cringy. Yeah. So there's a lot of those types of scenes.
Wait, it's not visually what? Sorry, what?
It's not visually, viscerally repelling. Like, if you saw an image of that, you wouldn't be like, oh, geez, because it's not gory or anything.
Demoralizing.
There's something about, like, the dialogue and the context in which it's happening.
So in that case, like, the commander is on the, like, Eastern Ukraine side, and the people are just people coming in from Western Ukraine. They're like...
maybe not even that. I don't think they necessarily passed the border.
No, I think they did. That is the border. Yeah.
Okay.
They're like coming over. They come into the border and they're like on the Eastern Ukraine side, and they're just like, there's a mix of people. Like there's older people and younger people, and commander basically like chastises them, has the
being
men come out of the bus, like all of the men, and like chastises them for being cowards because they're not serving that militia. Like they're clearly not serving because they're just being civilians, and has them like stripped down in this like very kind of symbolic and like upsetting way where it's like cold and snowy, and she's like stripped to the waist and like you're betraying your motherland and like all of this, you know, hyper patriotic language. And yeah, it's definitely uncomfortable to watch. And I just remember like,
but there's a mix, right? Like there's that type of thing. There's actual violent scenes. And then there's like more personal scenes, like the mother and daughter thing. So like, whoever you're referencing here when you say like it's uncomfortable, that's true. But that's like not necessarily a bad thing. Movies can be uncomfortable. It's just it's a lot because it's like it's 2 hours of like over and over and over again. It's kind of like you never saw this movie, but 8th grade, like you're in intense discomfort and anxiety the entire time.
Yeah, exactly. And
it's exhausting.
So it's exhausting, and the scenes are really long, and like, yeah. So I mean, so in terms of, when you have a movie like this, asking when it's playing with this like border between truth and fiction and all this bullshit, like it is important to ask a couple of questions. One of the questions that one of the questions I have is just like its actual basis in real events. That is something I'm curious about, which I actually asked the director about because he was there, and at the showing or whatever was the premiere. It was the New York premiere. He was there, and I asked like if there was a concrete video in YouTube, because people kept referencing, including him, kept referencing these like dysmorphic, I don't even know, this like concept of YouTube videos. YouTube videos that I watched or heard about. It's just like, well, what videos are you talking about? And so I wanted to know. And the fact
that he was like, there, like I wasn't able to track down the owner. It's like, okay, but it's uploaded by a person. Could you not contact that person? It just seemed odd to me.
Well, maybe he's not good at using the internet, which is...
Well, come on. He is. Like, he is, or somebody on his team is.
Yeah. So right. So there was that kind of like, I don't know, like excuse or something. But in any case, like he didn't seem so concerned with citing sources at all. But I was like, my question was, can you like say that is there a concrete video that sort of lines up with each specific scene in your movie? And then I unfortunately asked a second part of the question, which was about like, and how did you choose which things to include? And he only answered the second part. I mean, if answering at all. So I didn't get to know about that. Though, like, even if he said, I mean, that's just something to think about. Even if he said, like, yes, there is, like, that doesn't mean he's, like, obliged to provide me a list or something, though. That would have been cool.
I mean, it would be cool, yeah, if like, all the YouTube videos were in the credits. It's like, well, you
should also give people credit. Yeah.
Yeah, you should give people credit, which, like, he is, because he's, like, referencing the fact that they all came from YouTube videos, but it sort of seems like he's more doing it as nameless horde, and he's doing it as, like, look at this cool idea of, like, filmmaking, of using YouTube videos.
Yeah.
The problem that you had with it, and I also had this, because I actually enjoyed, like, the movie. I enjoy those kind of, like, long, drawn-out, boring things. I don't mind them. But the problem that we both have with it is that it's funded by the Western Ukrainian government, along with the EU and a bunch of other, like, arts
interested parties.
Interested parties, yeah. And it's being paraded around the West as, like, this great movie to watch. And I would say most people don't have stable footing in what's happening in Ukraine.
Definitely.
As a whole, really. Like even with our friends that we went, like you had to break it down and be like, oh no, this is how it is. And it's like, these aren't dumb people. They just like, it's confusing and there's a lot of other shit happening in the world. So this is being paraded around as like fact. And then the last thing is even the people who are introducing it and talking about it were talking about it as if it was a documentary.
Yes.
Which is so irresponsible.
Yeah. Very irresponsible.
And it's like nobody wanted to mention, oh, it's funded by the Western Ukrainian government. That's like insane to me. It's like if there was a movie about
funded by
Palestine,
the Russian government. Or
no, if it was a movie about Palestine and it was completely funded by Israel and it was just being walked around as a documentary, which would definitely happen, but there would be outrage about it for sure.
Yeah. And that's the thing. This is exactly, so yes, thank you for breaking it down. This is exactly the issue with this film. It's like, you can say whatever you want and be like, sure, he has artistic license to make as, one-sided film as he wants that only tells the story in a particular way that he wants to tell it. That's true.
The reason it's one-sided is basically every single vignette paints the Eastern militia as bad.
Well, yeah, and let's before I want to get a little bit more into that, but before I just break down why that is, I just mean like the main issue with that is, as you said, is how it's then presented. So not only is it like it's the people who are presenting it to us were encouraging the perception of it as a documentary, and we're saying things like, like based on absolutely no knowledge, saying things like, this really feels like more true to me than the actual events or something like that, which is crazy.
That guy's like retarded,
But whatever.
Like he sucks, but he's saying it in front of an audience of like maybe 150 people.
Yeah, and the other thing that really gets to me is like, okay, sure, in the film, because of like probably legal requirements, and just in general how films are made, it shows in the credits that this is funded by the Ukrainian government, including other funders, right? Just like you do see that if you're paying attention, but no one's fucking paying attention. Nobody talks about that. And lastly, one thing that you didn't point out is that this particular showing is being sponsored by Columbia University and like their Harriman Institute, and that pisses me off on another level because like as much as they, I don't know, I would just like to think that the academic establishment or whatever is attempting a little bit to like question things like government sponsorship and how that works, and to maybe like break down, especially for their students, like what are we seeing in this movie, rather than just being like, this is a depiction of Eastern Ukraine as it is.
I mean, they probably are breaking it down with their students. Like maybe there was some discussion after where they talked about it, and also it wasn't just that showing that like the Harriman Institute was involved in. It's the whole series, which let me just look up real quick what
the Harriman Institute's sponsoring the whole series.
I don't know if they're sponsoring it.
It's in part the screening of this movie was in part sponsored by the Harriman Institute. Said that.
Okay, so it's not all like Russia related or Eastern Europe related. There just happens to be like some Russia related stuff. So maybe they're sponsoring those ones. Because the like head of the film club or whatever got up and spoke. So he probably had some like initiative in getting that movie showing.
Yeah, and he's like Ukrainian professor Ukrainian at Columbia and stuff. But it's like, okay, sure, we weren't in a classroom setting. Right. But he also presented, it just makes it very clear that the people involved in this all have a very particular view of the political situation of the conflict in Ukraine, and they're going to present that view as though it is the view, which is what bias is. So like an example of how that worked in the we heard people talking about the movie after it was shown, but like, you think they're stupid. I think the guy who was giving the questions was pretty dumb too, but he was like very naive and just like not informed, and wanted to just basically like compliment the director a lot and be like, this was so amazing. So via it just wasn't like very informative.
Talking too much.
Yeah, via like, instead of asking questions, actually saying statements and then being like, do you agree? To the director.
That's like, Jesus Christ, like learn how to interview a little bit.
Yeah, it was really, really ridiculous.
Also, but like this isn't like a slight or anything, but like the director's English was not very good.
Right, which makes it harder for him to fully express himself. Like,
right.
He could have had a translator, but whatever. First thing about the film that shows everyone that it is biased towards like being from the Western Ukrainian point of view, the official point of view, right? Like really just that's all I mean. From the government, is having the way Eastern Ukraine, all the shots take place in Eastern Ukraine basically are on border points. And the way it's introduced is not the name of a concrete town, but it says like a small town in occupied Eastern Ukraine. So it uses the word occupied, and it also uses the word separatist to refer to the militia people. Mm-hmm. And so, okay, so that's that language choice alone. And it doesn't give a time, actually, a year or location, as I said, which is kind of shitty because it would be more interesting to know, because that's been part of the dynamic of the war, is that like it's changed quite a bit what's happening in the past 4 years, and like also the locations have changed and like where the conflict is. I mean, I just personally would like to know where it was, but in any case,
the timeline thing I think is important for being responsible, because by removing the times, he's like being like, this is timeless. This is how it is.
This
now.
Could be right now. This could be,
and it's not like,
know.
And it's not like a Western audience is going to be familiar enough with either the political landscape or like any sort of aesthetic landscape to be able to be like, oh, that looks like it was about 4 years ago.
Yeah, they could be like, that looks like some fucking scary post-Soviet nightmare landscape that I don't understand, and it could be in the 90s or now.
Right. What was the thing you said about it? You said something about it being post-Soviet. Like that's the aesthetic quality of it is just like that. I'm looking at buildings.
Well, that's because I said that about the very last scene of the movie, because the last scene is when a camera is just, sorry for the spoiler, just like very, very slowly zooming out of a scene that includes like basically like a film set, like a couple of trailers, and it's in kind of an open courtyard with these
Don't
big,
say what happens though.
I won't. Big, tall, gray concrete buildings, which are quintessential post-Soviet landscape, and it's just kind of like very slowly zooming out. And that shot is what one critic after the film called the best final shot in contemporary cinema, which just made me literally laugh, because I was like, I mean, that's just not possible. Like,
no, it's not
having seen
it's not possible.
But it's just not possible. So that kind of like ass licking was really intense in this premiere, and that also made me like kind of rageful. But because that's a thing that like people love to do. Maybe just like, I don't know if it's like just an American thing, but like being like, oh, like you come from this like poor culture, we're gonna everything you do to like expose it, like it must be good or something. When first of all, this guy's it doesn't even come from that culture. But anyway,
I think any poverty aesthetic like it's such a easy like cash grab or something. It's just like, I'm gonna show poor people, and then I'm like golden.
Right. And so like my thinking was that guy said that he thinks that's the best last shot because it was like so quintessentially post-Soviet in quotes, because of those like monotonous concrete buildings. Did he use the word
post-Soviet?
No. Somebody did in the intro, but they were just, I don't know what they were talking
I think the like film club guy did. He did.
Yeah, he did. But I don't know what he was referring to.
He was Russian or Ukrainian.
Probably Ukrainian, I would imagine. Yeah. Because he's a professor of Ukrainian. I'm just guessing.
He was a professor of Ukrainian?
Yeah. Okay. And the head of the film club. Ukrainian film club at Columbia. But so I think that was like really capitalizing on just like this sort of people, this like joy for some reason of like looking at this gray kind of horrible.
Why do people get off on that so much?
I don't know, because it's unfamiliar. It's like removed, and it just feels like you're peeking in on something. It feels like
like the market for like poor people of color is saturated.
Yeah, and also
like we've all seen like starving African children. We don't need to see that shit anymore. Yeah, show me some gray buildings in a post-Soviet space. That really gets me going.
I think people also like the urban aspect. I don't know why, but for some reason the urban poverty, like it's post-apocalyptic. That's very romantic, because it's like this is what could happen if like a city decays, and cities aren't supposed to decay. They're supposed to like be maintained forever up, like kept up somehow, which makes no sense because people are constantly like beating on them every day, and they're in constant state of repair. So it's like I feel like something about because the countryside, like that can also be a place of poverty, but I think in so many cases, but I think somehow because there's fewer man-made objects in the countryside, there's less like clear signs of the decay of human-made objects,
Yeah, although even in this movie, there were shots of like villages that also had a similar aesthetic, that like gray color scheme.
When was there a village?
There was, I want to say where the bunker was like small individual little houses in a field. Like a lot of the border zone areas were that way.
Okay. I thought they were just like, they were like fields, but I don't know if there was like a town there. But yeah, I mean,
even like think about where we went. Oh God, what was that place called? The place outside of Laura's that we took the train out of.
Oh, 100%. That is a old, like almost dead village. Yeah. No, and that has a particular, also, like that looked like a particularly Russian, or what I know, Russian villages rather than a village in some other country, just based on like the windows or something.
The Dixie, and the other one.
Yeah, that town. But you hear what I'm saying about like the more things that are built, the more you can see them decay if they're decaying, and that's.
But
like,
honestly,
kind of
like
fun.
I mean, in this particular movie, it wasn't so much that I guess there was like rubble and stuff, but it wasn't so much that the buildings were decaying, but that like
the people
there were scenes.
horrible.
Yeah, there were scenes of like violence and war within an urban setting.
Yeah, and also I just want to. So we keep repeating this. The factor of the audience is so important, because like I just like. Even amongst our friends, like it's not just that they didn't know like about the conflict, but remember, like one of them didn't even know at the end of the film which side had been like portrayed.
The bad side.
The bad side,
Yeah.
because it's confusing because there's like no extra information given. So if you don't,
But that's okay. I don't think that we can critique that necessarily.
okay, but I'm just saying, like, there's very little, there's like almost no preparedness. So it just makes it like you have like a void of information, and then this movie has like a monopoly on it.
Which is like the classic problem with Eastern Russia or Eastern Europe.
Yeah. So as soon as somebody like makes something,
It's like void of information, like one like like made aesthetic product comes out and everybody like humps it for the next 5 years.
Yeah. And so okay, so the other thing, so
I'm talking about a particular novel.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God, I actually thought about that novel during it, because okay, this is a side note, the conversation in the bus, this is by no means like an important point, but just the thing I thought about and tittered to myself about. The conversation in the bus right before the like militia officer comes in and asks for meat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The two grandmas are talking about like winterizing their terrace.
Oh.
Remember, they're talking about putting up glass.
Yeah.
And, like,
Yes. Yeah. And also like speculating on if their homes are still going to be there.
Yes, but they're like, at one point, one of them's like, we were planning on okay, side note, all of the acting was like so forced. It was like really not good acting. That annoyed me the whole time.
Not all of it.
A lot of it. I mean, I don't know. A lot of it, like, this is not about the content. It's just like, honestly was like, just felt unnatural, because it's like a lot of them were not professional actors. So just, like, was really unnatural.
I wonder if that was the driving factor, or like at some point that has to become intentional. Like I
think it was intentional, but that is annoying to me.
That's not necessarily annoying for me.
Well, I just found like
think about, remember that movie Joy? How it was that way in that movie also. And those are professional actors. Remember that movie? We saw it together. It's that one with Jennifer Lawrence where she's like a infomercial sales lady.
Oh, yeah.
And it also had that sort of like forced, cheesy, like people don't actually talk like that thing going on.
Okay, well, yeah, this definitely had that, which I think like I would argue made it less, and this is totally probably intentional, but like, yeah, less authentic, or like less like raw or something. And anyway,
which is probably from our argument side is like a good thing. Like there should be a layer of unreality, because if that thing was super, like if the actors were really good and it felt really authentic,
it would be even more like a documentary.
Yeah.
But he should have just montaged together into YouTube videos. That would be cool.
Put some music over them.
It would have been cool, honestly. Like that, I don't know. It's the artifice aspect is like a confusing thing to me, because like people usually. So I think part of the reason people could really latch on to this as being authentic and raw and not pay attention to the artifice just happens to be it's like intense foreignness for the audience that was watching it, because I think like that wouldn't work as well with something that people were really familiar with. I think it would be more, it's always appealing to have something be like, feel like it really is it happening. I mean, especially that feel like it's like footage from a war front.
Yeah.
And so having this layer of artifice, I think, worked better for an audience that has less familiarity, is basically what I'm saying. But in any case, the conversation the two grandmas are having is like really, to me, really felt especially artificial, because it felt like it was weird. It was like, it actually really reminded me of that book, because they were talking about something that is really obvious, and that people, like, they explained something that I would not imagine any Russian or like Soviet person ever explaining, which is why you need to put glass around your porch.
Because everybody would already know that.
She was like, we were planning on putting glass around our porch to store our stuff in the winter so that it's warm. And it was just like, obviously that's why you're doing that. Like, that's a normal thing. It's really normal to use your terrace as a storage space. Or not terrace, but like your closed porch.
We're talking about Keith Gesson's book. In the Keith Gesson book, it's possible he used language like that because he understood he was writing for a Western audience. I don't know if that was the intent.
Right. Well, I mean, it could have been, though. So that's maybe. The
other thing is, I know this is kind of like not... all evidence points this not being the case, especially because I haven't watched this guy's other movies, so I don't really have an idea of it. But I do think that there's some sort of possibility that he understands that he's modifying reality in like this false way by having this movie. Like what I said after we were going to dinner is like somebody who spends so much time thinking about like that like slippage between reality and fiction. Like he has to reflect on the own thing. The thing that he's made. And
he allegedly spends time doing that because he's a documentary maker, or what?
But the whole movie was like permeated with that really intensely. So like he's thinking about it at least in an artistic sense. And I would assume that at the end he has his final product and he watches it and he understands that he's modifying reality by making the movie. I just don't see how you couldn't. The thing is, like, it's possible that all those scenes have happened. Like, it's not out of the realm of possibility that those scenes have happened, but only focusing on those scenes, like every single scene was either gruesome or uncomfortable or like violent, every single one, like you really paint a certain picture. Whereas if you had picked one of those scenes and then everything else could have been like just images of people going about their daily lives or like more in depth and like conversations, like there weren't actually any, there was so few conversations within it that indicated that people in Eastern Ukraine were thinking critically about the conflict.
Yeah.
Like everything was really politically charged. It was like either it's really politically charged and people are super patriotic and like grotesquely patriotic, or they're these like sad, waifish, like silent victims of war who, to quote the director, actually kind of like the hell they're living in, and that's why they're choosing to continue to live in it.
What I really want to get a little bit more into like explaining my reaction, which you've definitely like outlined. But so like this bombardment of really caricatured scenes, like as you said, like there's just scene after scene of a negative portrayal of the people in it, and the people all are from Eastern Ukraine. And it's like what it does and why I would consider this film to be like, with, if not fully propagandistic, because that's just like, I don't know, whatever, with propagandistic elements, is that...
I mean, I would almost feel I would feel comfortable as calling it propaganda.
Yeah, I do too. And here's why. Like, we just had an interview with a propaganda expert, and we know how this works. The film creates an enemy, and it does that. It creates an enemy that's very clear, and that's the people of Eastern Ukraine.
Any person of Eastern Ukraine, basically.
Any person, not just the government, not just the soldiers. And it does so by like the main tactic of enemy making, which is dehumanizing. And it depicts the people as like, again, of all walks and stuff of life, of all ages, as being these kind of like either totally brutal, savage, kind of stupid, cruel
patriotic
people.
Neanderthals,
like stupid, cruel, which is like in the scenes with the soldiers when they like make fun of the German guy or something like that, or as being, as you said, like these pitiful but also like ugly and repulsive victims who are very flat. like do not have personalities and stupid and not critical. So it's like the dehumanizing factor, like as we've talked about so many times, it's such an important element of propaganda because it makes it so that like it essentially just makes it so that it's easier to commit violence against people who are not humans. I mean, that's
to top it off, it's like, you do all these things that are like indications of propaganda, and then it's funded by the Western Ukrainian government.
Right.
That's so crazy that
I know
they didn't say anything about that in the presentation of the movie.
I know, it's really messed up. And that could be something to discuss that's more interesting than this like floaty. I like cannot say what was discussed. I haven't like they was just talking about like basically the border of reality and unreality without having any basis. The guy didn't have any basis in reality, so he's just saying like his opinion. He's like, from all the YouTube videos I never watched, this seems more realistic than the YouTube videos.
That guy was
yeah, the dehumanizing like comes through in and okay, I use the word savage, which I'm sure is like questionable,
problematic.
Yeah, but you know, like when the soldier comes on the bus and he's in that like fur thing, and then he like cuts off the meat with a knife. That is behavior of a person from like another, I don't know what to call it, time or like culture entirely. Like,
I mean,
I don't know,
coat
like,
is beautiful, but it's like an old. It's
like ripped fur, right?
Right,
it's like,
but like over the military fatigues.
Yeah, like they're trying to depict him as this like.
And he's like kind of hunched and giant, like lumbering down the aisle.
This, like,
and then he hacks off like a chunk of meat with a knife. Right.
I mean, there's this bestial quality. Oh my God. And then like, okay, so as I said, that's a dehumanizing factor. We also, so we're in the the land of Eastern Ukraine the whole time in the movie, and we see that it's being bombed and attacked, and that means it's being bombed and attacked by Western Ukraine. But there's no indication of that. We really don't see the like other side, and so that's like the other part of how the movie is biased, is that we don't see. Yeah. Well, we see there's very few scenes. There's that one scene with the official where we see someone from like Ukraine.
Yeah, you see a few border scenes with him, but that I honestly feel like that inclusion of like bombs exploding and stuff, I don't know. I'm definitely giving the director too much credit, but might be some sort of like nod to the fact that this is not an accurate depiction of reality. Like anybody who's semi-critical, like anybody who's not a complete dunce is going to watch that movie and like should have some sort of like head tilting response to it. Like, what is that about?
But obviously, but he had to include, like, it's not a secret that Western Ukraine is bombing Eastern Ukraine. Like, that can't be a secret. That's like that. What's happening is, or was that not what you're saying? That like by showing it, he's like showing.
I think that it offers an opportunity for the slightly more critical audience to understand what they're seeing is very biased. Because he could go the whole time without showing. Like the first explosion we see is staged, so he could continue to do, and that kind of, well, maybe I'm going to renege on what I just said, but that the fact that the first form of violence we see is staged makes you question if the following ones are staged and if any act of violence is staged.
I mean, it appears to be staged because the like reactions to it are staged, and that's what I read in other reviews. It's like it sets up the sort of like post-truth view of the movie where it's like, is anything real or whatever? But you definitely see people in Eastern Ukraine suffering. So again, it's not like he's not showing suffering. He's showing suffering, right. But he's also showing brutality, cold-heartedness, a lack of empathy, and pure stupidity, and like really kind of like, and like a deep level of ignorance. Like the scene with the German journalist is like very intensely caricatured, like as though, as though basically like all Russians think all Germans are fascists. I mean, that's what it is. That's like the essence of that scene.
I mean, yeah. To me though, that scene didn't feel like the soldiers weren't actually accusing him of being fascist. They were just being stupid. Haranguing him. Yeah, they were haranguing him, and then finally like their commander called them off.
Yeah, the commander who had just like chastised a bunch of boys and made them take their shirts off. Yeah. I mean, like, and then like it's very, I'm taking this from this one like interview also that I read that helped me think through it, but it's like one review, sorry, not interview. very monolithic image of the enemy, which is a direct quote. But I think that really sums it up well. So you get a sense of there's one enemy, and that's who the enemy is. So that's part of how the bias works. And then like
and they're the enemy not because of their like perpetrations on another nation, but against their own people. That's the implication of the movie, because you don't see interaction between Eastern and Western Ukraine. You really only see like Eastern Ukrainian militia people doing horrible things to citizens, or citizens being subjugated in some way.
No, but you see the pole scene is
the pole scene.
Tied to a pole scene is with a like Ukrainian. I don't get what he was, like something, but he was from.
What did they call it? What did they call him? There was a word for it.
Some kind of volunteer.
But yeah, I mean the pinnacle. I mean, at least I think the director said this, or somebody said this. Like the pinnacle vignette or scene of the movie is this time when they've captured some sort of Western Ukrainian soldier and bring him into Eastern Ukraine, and basically like these two militia soldiers tie him to a pole and then essentially allow like the townspeople to do what they will with him.
Yeah, to like humiliate him and attack him, punch him. And the thing is, and like just generally humiliate and like degrade him. The thing is though, like you mentioned that these things could be based in reality, but as a side note, like I wasn't able to like definitively, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to prove that like these things didn't happen. And I don't think that that's like really the point anyway. But a lot of the scene, part of the caricatures of the scene, it's like a scene that like sort of could happen, but like way overblown, or that like is unlikely. For example, there's a lot of examples, but I think like the scene with like, one really crazy patriotic commander making people strip down and humiliating them for not serving is like one of the more possible scenes. Mm-hmm. But the scene of tying somebody to a post thing, like that is something that I would say, first of all, there's like, I've seen YouTube videos of people being tied in public with the sign on their neck, in both in Western and Eastern Ukraine, and like by the people, not by like enforcement or military. Sure. That's scary, but like those sort of like freakish scenes do happen, and they have like a precedent. I don't know, the concept of the actual militiamen doing it and having it be sort of sanctioned, I think is questionable. Definitely questionable, but like
I don't know if it's questionable or not.
But it is questionable. I mean, this like I just don't have like we don't have enough information, and again, it's sort of besides the point, because like even if that was if that happened, it wouldn't be like a common occurrence. But that's just not like, and the way the crowd reacted, I wish that I like could see that YouTube video, because I mean,
you could find it by searching, probably, if it's still up.
Yeah, I mean, I've searched YouTube videos for like that kind of thing, for like people being tied by the militia, and I was able to find the like the ones I'd seen them before, because like there's just a couple of like more viewed ones, but I mean, I didn't look for that long. I mean, my like singular source on all this said that, I mean, and yeah, again, singular source and everything, but this is like somebody who is from that world, said that like that kind of thing is like, first of all, in their personal experience, the way people react is much more like just get the fuck out and avoid that kind of thing. If you see it, you don't go up to somebody and punch them, because you don't know what's going on there. And like most people, I don't think, would be like taking selfies, and that grotesque was like, that is grotesque, really exaggerated. And I think according to this person, like most people would just like get as far away from that spot as possible. And then also said that like punishments, at least in the very beginning of the conflict, there were more sort of mob militia situations in which like people somehow got weapons and just like decided that they were armed forces, and they did stuff like that. And like they could do something like that, like tie someone up, and be like, I have a gun, so like I'm a soldier. But that like later in the conflict, when there was more military organization, things were like more by the rules, which is that like, if you have a captive from the other side, like
prisoner of war,
like there are a set of whatever rules in terms of what you do with that prisoner of war, and tying them to a post so that people can punch them is not in that set. So yeah, so it's about like showing these intensely exaggerated and like grotesque scenes in a row, and as you said, without showing anything else. It's just like, this is a monopoly. It's like,
oh Jesus, what a horrible land. Why would it like to go there at all?
I mean, and it's so sad because, like, to me, like, yeah, I don't know. Well, my personal interest is definitely more in, like, what's happening in people's apartments and stuff.
Yeah.
Other everyday life things and, like, people having opinions.
Actually literally no conversations about the conflict between just, like, two regular people.
Or just their experience, like, except for the one who's like, my house is maybe not there, like, but their experience of, like, what are they doing, like, how are they doing now, what happened when it started, like, no voices, like, just the people in the bunkers, they don't have any voices.
Oh God, the bunker scene. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, yeah.
I have 5 minutes.
It's 25. So. You gotta go. Wait, let me just, before you go, let me just check my notes that I didn't not rant on anything that I needed to rant on. And, well, we didn't get to talk about, like, you know, any of my limited knowledge of the other side, so we didn't provide anyone with any of that, but that can be in another episode, and it will be. So
sometime.
Yeah, sometime. Well, no, not that one. Now. In the one where we talk about the history more.
Oh, okay.
Because, like, the little mini history I gave at the beginning is, like, obviously not enough for people. And sometimes you have to be on, like, the side of the, like, in this case, you don't have to be, but it's hard. It makes sense to, like, be on the other side, whatever, because, like, we're not showing, that film did not show their perspective of, as much as it showed only Eastern Ukrainian people, it didn't show their perspective, funnily enough. Isn't that ironic?
Very ironic. All right. But yeah, I mean, if I would still recommend going to see it if you get the opportunity. So
imagine if a film was funded by Putin, though. Like, how people would not watch it or be pissed. It's just so funny.
I know.
If it was funded by the Russian government, they'd be like,
really ridiculous.
Evidently propagandistic. Also, it's just, yeah. Okay.
It's
all right.
Running on red lights, turning left, go right. I know road go right. I'm on go tonight. Go, 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 go. If I drive off the bridge, tell them that I live my life like a kid, captain of my ship.
All right, that's the episode. Thanks for listening. As always, be sure to follow us on Twitter and Telegram at She's in Russia. Sign up for our monthly image-based newsletter, and consider becoming a Patreon, because what we're trying to do with this money right now is hire a translator, because we have a shit ton of things to translate and it sucks for Lily to have to do them all. So help us out there.
Is fund a film about Western Ukraine from the perspective.
I want to thank specifically our most recent patrons, because we've had a couple. Let me just pull them up right now. I won't say your last name, don't worry.
Mommy, are you a patron?
Loading. All right. Thank you to Charles and Ross. I don't know. RAHS. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
It's much appreciated. I haven't sent your stickers yet, but I'll do that. I've been slow. Okay. And we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Okay, they can't take my attitude. Shortcut is the avenue. Shit, I had to move. Did what I had to do. Doing good to be mad at you. I'm in a two-seater, but it's only me. When another red light, man, they on to me. See about all, heat up high. Open that biggie, but you're ready to die.